Welcome back to the Nordic Pavilion. My name is Mark Isitt. I'm an architecture critic based in Copenhagen, right on architecture and city planning. And in 2 years' time, in 2023, Copenhagen will host the largest architectural festival or conference, is a better word maybe, the UIA World Congress. UIA stands for the International Union of Architects. Focus is on the UN's 17 Sustainable Development Goals. How can architects help limit the carbon footprint? And considering that the building sector accounts for more than 1/3 of the global CO2 emissions, it is a pretty urgent task. Here to discuss this is an eminent panel. Enlai Hoi. How do you pronounce your surname?
That'll do. Enlai Hui.
Hui.
Yeah.
You've got an English accent.
Hoi, Australian.
Australian.
A kind of Australian, a very narrow band of Australian.
Okay, but you live in Copenhagen.
Correct.
Okay, and you work for Schmidt Hammer Lassen.
That is correct.
Which is the architectural practice that has designed and sought a Diamant, the big black library on the quayside. That was before your day, though.
That's correct.
Yeah. Nadia Kuruskop Kissensen, you're a UN delegate, youth delegate.
Exactly, for climate and environment.
Okay, so you've got that specific focus.
Yeah, that is
How many of you are there around in the world?
From Denmark or like in general in the world?
In general.
Too few. There is not enough.
A good question.
There is a lot, especially in the global north, and that is of course amazing, but we still need a lot more young people to be involved in a more structured way, especially in the global south. So that is also something that I and my co-delegate, we are working on.
How does one get involved?
How do you get involved as a youth delegate? Oh, that is a complicated process.
But
so you're interested, or how is it?
Yeah, well, I would love to.
Of course.
Not anymore, maybe. But I've got 2 sons.
Yeah, okay, interesting. So what you need to tell them is that you need to be elected by someone. So what is important in regards to youth involvement is that you're not just having a random young person on the scene. So it is important that I am representing a lot of other young people. So there is a Danish organization that has nominated me, and then another Danish Youth Council, they have elected me among other amazing young people. So then I'm kind of representing the Danish Youth Council, which is 600,000 young people. So that is, of course amazing, but beside that, it's also really important for me to get out and speak with those people. So that is something that we have done ahead of COP26.
But you have a political background.
Yes, I do.
Are you still active in Radikale Venstre?
No, I'm not. And when you say radical, then it's kind of different. Like radical in English is not the same as in Danish. So it would be translated to social liberal. So I was kind of in the middle, kind of like always the one agreeing and disagreeing with everyone. And I still kind of do that without having like a political party hat on, because I'm not here as a politician. I am here as a young person representing other young people.
And that was not the reason why you happen to end up in the middle.
Exactly, that's important.
Thomas Vonnier, you former president of the UIA.
Correct.
What do you do now then?
Well, I'm an architect in private practice and looking forward to being back in that business. I've been 4 years as the president. That's a long term, and it's a lot of work, so I'm very proud of what we've accomplished, but I'm happy to be out of it.
What did you accomplish?
Well, you're looking here at part of it. I think one of our permanent commissions is called the Commission on Sustainable Development Goals, and one of the convictions that drives them is that architecture can contribute to every single one of the 17 goals. Not just number 11 about buildings and communities, but everything, ending poverty, improving food supply, creating equity in the built environment. So I think this is a message that we try to get across about architecture's role. Architecture isn't just about reducing carbon, and people don't build buildings to save carbon. That's not why they build buildings. They do it to satisfy a range of needs, human needs, and many of these 17 goals are addressed at basic human needs. So we try to make a contribution in every one of those 17 areas.
This book just came from the printers. It's called An Architecture Guide to the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals, Volume 2. That
Correct.
must be a Volume 1.
There is a volume 1. The beauty of this is that it shows specific examples of projects all around the world in different geographic zones, climatic regions, social and ethnic contexts. So it's a very broad kind of look at how building design and urban design have made contributions. I remember very well being at COP21. It's now 6 years ago in Paris. And there was a mayor from a town who came and said, don't tell me we have a problem. I know we have a problem. Don't preach at me about the environmental issues. I know we have issues. Tell me what I can do. Tell me about solutions that work. And that's what this is really all about.
And you put this book in, or the Volume 1 book in his hand.
We're trying to put it everywhere we can get it.
Okay, so we really don't need to have this conversation because all you can do is read this book.
Good,
right.
Thank you. Well,
okay,
we're done.
Thanks, great. Where's the party?
Yeah.
Do we have a reason to party? Do we have, I mean, the fact that we're all here talking about this important question is worth a party, right? Enlai.
It's definitely a call to action. And the question is, what is our agency as individuals? What is our agency collectively? And how do we build that, actually? And I think it's interesting because there's always a question around architecture. Well, what can architects do? Because we operate in a more or less mercantile commercial world. Sometimes not, but most of the time, yes. And then the question is, you know, what is the role of the architect and what can the architect actually do to instigate this kind of change? And I think this is definitely part of it. And I don't think we can party until a party is beneficial for the nature and world as well as it is for us.
We party like it's 1999.
Yes, that's we still party like it's 1999, unfortunately. Yeah.
Oh, I was born that year, but great.
That was what your parents did.
Yeah, I don't want to hear about that.
Yeah.
But it's pretty fantastic that we're here talking about architecture at such a humongously big event, right? I mean, that is promising. It's going the right direction. Am I right, Nadja?
Like in general or with architecture?
Your choice.
Yeah, my choice. So I think in general it's going in the right direction and also with architecture, but it's going far too slow. Yeah. And that I think is something that you could ask a lot of young people and they would all say the same. There's a lot of good intentions, but it's going far too slow. And that is also the problem, that there is so much talk and not enough action. And I really hope that this COP will be the COP of action. So that is really something that I want to point out, and I'm looking very much forward to discussing how that can be done in architecture, because I do see also in the book, I haven't read it yet, I've only opened it, but you know, you do see a lot of good examples there, and there's a lot of good examples with architecture where, you know, there's really good thoughts behind it, and where you're really looking to how can we improve buildings that are already there. And we earlier on briefly started the discussion without you, where we got to talk about the importance of actually not just building new and forgetting the buildings that are already there or tearing them down, but where we did get to talk about how can we refurbish them, how can we make them, give them a second life. And I think that is so interesting, because that is where we need to go, and that is a solution that is needed for the agriculture.
I'm not sure that an architect would agree. I mean, I can see that is the way to go from a sustainability point of view, but from an artistic point of view, how much fun is that? Retrofitting villas or something?
Yeah. I would say one thing is that the focus on buildings is a bit single-minded. Our cities, we were talking earlier about the nature of our cities and how the automobile and the individual passenger vehicle has become so dominant. And only now are we beginning to see a reversal of that, and it's such a difficult problem because so much investment has been made in these network of roads and all of these devices that are meant to handle automobile traffic by and large, not pedestrians, not cyclists. That's not true in places like Copenhagen as much as it is in other places. So I think one of the principal challenges we have is to find ways to accommodate the built environment in a manner that produces benefit for people rather than automobiles or trucks or other kinds of vehicles. And it's a hard struggle. Denmark is making some wonderful strides. There's a woman landscape architect who's been doing beautiful designs of roadways that are now being modified for cyclists and pedestrians to grow things. And I think this is the way of the future. It's happening in Paris on a more limited scale. But that is where the challenge lies. In addition to trying to come to terms with the investment we've made in existing buildings and trying to make them perform better, we have this vast problem of the sort of infrastructure that's been designed to support anything but human life.
Right, right. And there's something that I think you were trying to get at earlier, which was about how desirable is it to renovate rather than knock down and rebuild, because that really calls into the question, what is the dream of an architect actually? Like how, when we get out of school and we choose architecture, do we want to choose to build a symbol of something? And how do you do that if it already exists, right? And that calls into question the nature of creativity in the first place, because we understand as architects that although we try to create a tabula rasa, there is never a tabula rasa. There's always system boundaries. There's always things that influence the architecture. And if they don't influence the architecture, if they are forms in space and they could be scaleless and placeless, then that's not just irresponsible, but it's quite uncreative. So if we talk about the idea of creativity and we talk about, trying to transform what exists, then the responsibility of the architect and probably the joy of an architect is the limitation, but also the creative challenge. The ability to take what exists and see value and quality into it. And I think the number one thing that an architect needs to do before they even consider the brief is look at and assess and understand what is the value in what exists. And from then, it's a new creative exercise to matriculate from that and create architecture that considers the context in a playful way, in a creative way, and in an intelligent way.
But you're speaking from an architect's point of view here, and it's an office, Schmidt-Hammer-Lassen, which has, the Sorte Diamant, the library down on the quayside, as we mentioned initially, is one of the first really iconic buildings of the modern age Denmark, in a way. I remember when that was, I was there interviewing Kim Holst Jensen, and it was, I'd hardly seen anything like it before, in the Nordic region. And you've just done the one iconic building after the other, really.
Right.
Will you not be able to do that in the future? Because I love that. I love that spectacular architecture that your office stands for.
That's an interesting question, and perhaps one way to understand it is that actually it is the Sorte Diamant, the Black Diamond library, which is on the water in the main sort of sea canal in Copenhagen. It is a symbol, it is an icon, but its purpose was to reactivate the existing library. So the idea is, and this is where it, the intention about how architecture is put together becomes extremely important. And the idea is to democratize the ground level, to let people flow through the building, and it's a big, black, quite pristine object, but in the center is this massive carving that when you see the light and when you get this slice in the rock, if you like, its whole design is to bring you up and let you experience the library as it existed before, as well as sort of democratize the space that you can occupy.
They're not incompatible aims.
No,
beauty,
no, they're not, no.
Beauty and utility and all the rest.
No, that's right.
No, that's what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
Yes, maybe. They're not incompatible, and there are ways, I guess, in which you can do the iconic and still serve the history.
Okay, great. So I will still see iconic buildings being built. Okay, good.
Different kinds of icons as well.
Yeah.
What in South Australia? Victoria, Melbourne, where I grew up, there was an existing iconic building that needed to be transformed, and the way to create a new icon these days is not to necessarily build something spectacular, but to try and ask the community what they want, because really you can create an icon that's loved by the people symbolically, and you can also create an icon by gathering the needs and intentions of people and getting them to participate. Then they hold on to the building for longer, and the buildings last longer.
Yeah, so what I love that you're saying is the word asking people, or the two words, because I think that is really important to keep in mind, because the special thing about being in this panel is that I guess that I'm the only one not working with architecture in my everyday, and I think that is like really important to keep in mind, that we're not building cities, we're not building houses or buildings for the sake of an architect to feel good about himself, or to be able to look at an icon and think, wow, I did good. That is not the purpose of building. The purpose is to create homes and lives where people thrive, and that is why we need to ask those people. And now you mentioned the Black Diamond, and I haven't really heard much critique about that one. There probably has been, maybe it was before I was old enough to care about the debate.
I don't think there was actually. There wasn't much critique.
Yeah. But what I remember was Blocks, which is another building just next to the Black Diamond, and there were so many critiques about that building. And I'm not saying anything positively or negatively about Blocks. I'm just saying there was a lot of debate about that, and there were so many people who didn't like that, and maybe there was an involving process ahead of it, but I just think that it's so important to ask people and to keep that fact in mind, that this is not about one person feeling good about him or herself.
No, but
the mayor of Paris took a block of money and asked a team of people to come up with proposals about how the physical environment could be improved. So they had 10 or 12 different proposals by arrondissement, there are 20. And then they went and had a plebiscite about which ones people wanted. They put the ideas up, they had people vote on them, and very interestingly, the things that rose to the top were more parks, better sidewalks and wider sidewalks, more facilities for parking bicycles as well as riding them. The things that, my principle is that what's good for people is good for the planet. And I think design that is good in the urban environment for families, for elderly, for people who are studying, for people who are working, those places, if they work well for people, are also good for the planet, because it means you're not relying on an automobile for everything.
Right.
It means that you are walking and using other means of transport. It means that you're using your environment in a constructive way.
But why did that surprise you? The result of that.
I think it didn't surprise me, but it moved me in the sense that people actually know what is in their best interest. That's a revelation, perhaps not to an architect or a politician necessarily.
Not a politician here.
Yeah, but it is a revelation in the terms of the way monies are apportioned and spent in the public environment, and I think a very interesting model.
Do you ever find it frustrating? I'm thinking, Anne Hidalgo, the mayor of Paris, and the Colombian professor Carlos Moreno introduced the 15-minute, the 15-minute city. When I was a kid, we had something called ABC, staden. A stood for arbete, work. B stood for living, bostad. And C stood for centrum, which was the city center, shopping.
All right.
Okay. So, and that was, everything in Sweden should be built that way. Those three components should be there together. That's the 15-minute city.
I think
but it's a 5-minute city, kind of, because Sweden is so much smaller, or Stockholm or Gothenburg or whatever is so much smaller than Paris.
I think
so. It's nothing new.
We've strayed so far from these basic principles, so many places, that it's important to restate them, to simplify them to 15-minute city, ABC, whatever is the simple formula, but some way of allowing people to grasp the idea and ensure that it's implemented in a way that's constructive.
That's about the whole story about architecture, allowing people to grasp the idea, right? Because one of the things that architects can do that in some ways is different to what politicians do is propose models of futures that people can see. And I believe I agree with you that people know what is good for them, but they have to be able to see what is good for them before they know it. You know, it's not to say that we have a special kind of vision, but we just have the skills of being able to propose futures in a way that people can understand.
It's actually a power.
In a way, yeah. But I mean, I would
it's
maybe...
a superpower.
It's a power for good.
I would maybe even extend what you're saying and to actually say that what's good for people is good for the planet, but also what's good for people is other animals, other living things. And we, I feel, have suffered a kind of poverty, especially in places that do, like the Western world, of removing our interaction.
Did you call the Western world doomed? What was the word?
No, I don't know. But no,
That's what I heard.
there is a kind of poverty of the Western world in big cities, and that's the removal of the experience of food, of nature, of wild things, and I feel like we crave it. But the idea of designing not just for humans but for the whole of biology, I think is something that is becoming stronger as a concept in cities, and should be part of the regenerative way that we build back better.
Does it have anything to do with Corona, the pandemic, that we're more conscious of what we've got around us, our media surrounding?
I think what I would say is that people have rediscovered the value of having recreational space outdoors near them.
Yeah.
And that's a wonderful thing. It's been a great thing. And if you look at what restaurants have had to do in many cities, take over pieces of the street, they're now lobbying to keep it, which I think is a great thing. You know, let's take back from the automobile, let's take it for people. I'm all for it. You know, we're going to Copenhagen in 2023, as you said. There'll probably be, I don't know, 15,000 architects who come to Denmark from all over the world. That's an optimistic figure, but I think it's realistic. And they will see a city that has tried to do things in a very deliberate way, in a very serious way, and that's going to have an impact all over the world. I'm confident of it, because this point you make about being able to envision an alternative or a way things could be, it's very powerful when you actually see it with your own eyes in action. So I'm very excited about going to Copenhagen.
Tell us a bit about what a UIA conference is like. 15,000 architects might attend.
Yep.
For how long does it go on?
Full week. It's usually 5 days or so. And we call it a Congress because it brings people together in Congress. That's the idea, to learn from one another and to exchange views and ideas. Usually there are stars who speak. That's a normal sort of piece of it. And the main purpose, though, and we're working with UNESCO now on this, is to use the city as a sort of showcase for ideas and ways forward. And I think what could be a better example than Copenhagen?
So it's not only in the fairground, it's out on the town.
Oh no, it's very much a big part of it, is to use and see the town. And I know the people in Copenhagen who are organizing this are very interested in having people see what's been done.
Yeah. And has sustainability always been such a big part of the UIA Congress?
Well, it was founded in 1948 by men, and they were all men, who had gone through the Second World War and had witnessed the destruction, principally in Europe, but not only in Europe, of cities. And they believed in the idea that architecture could be a powerful force for good. Auguste Perret, whose name will be known to architects, was the first president, and he and his brother rebuilt Le Havre, which had been bombed into oblivion by the Allied forces on the French coast. So it's an organization that has always worked to show the value of architecture and how it can help society. And I think that's why we've embraced this whole idea of the 17 sustainable goals.
So the sustainability focus that we will see in 2023, that's not unique.
No, I think it's a logical progression and a coalition of forces that have been at work for a long time, and I think they will come to a very interesting sort of culmination for us in Copenhagen.
But has the building sector accounted for, what is it, 1/3 of the carbon footprint before? I mean, isn't it more urgent to talk about sustainability now than it's ever been within this sector?
It is. I don't know. Oh, so I definitely think that it is so important to think about sustainability now more than ever, and I think that what is especially important and what I hope that you guys will bring along to the conference is that it is so important to think about how does this impact the rest of the world. So when we source materials from somewhere else, like how was that done? Was that done in a sustainable way? Yeah. How was the working conditions for the people working with, sourcing the materials? And all of those things is so important to keep in mind. And I really also hope that there would be a focus on circular economy and like really trying to create a sustainable system, because I think that of course there's good examples, but we need to go beyond that, where we're talking like carbon neutral, we're talking about positive impact on biodiversity, we're talking about social sustainability. There's so many topics that needs to be, brought to that conference and brought beyond that conference into everyday life and everyday acting.
Could it be at Schmidt-Hammer-Lassen that you say no to a client? That we don't want to work with you, you're not living up to the agreement?
We do. I think it's actually very important to have the agency and the responsibility to say no at a certain point where you say, this is not benefiting the world. Just the simple idea that someone's ready to pay for something doesn't mean that it's valuable enough to be built. Value doesn't come necessarily from the contract, it comes from the process, if you like. And I feel like the right of refusal is something that architects often remove from themselves. And they say some things like, oh, if I don't do it, somebody else will, and they'll do it worse. But I really do believe that we have to hold together as a group and have this collective, let's say, agency or action on the world that will set standards for how things should be done, and not, relinquish our power actually as a profession.
I think one of the things that has happened that is constructive in one sense but not in another is this idea that if a corporation builds a building that is LEED certified or somehow qualifies under one of the rating systems as an energy conserving building, they've sort of salved their corporate conscience and put out a message that we care and we're responsible. And I think one very encouraging thing I see at COP26 is the pressure that's being put on various industries to curb methane, to stop deforestation, to adopt responsible policies about sourcing of materials. And I think clients in some areas are leading architects and asking them to do things that are beyond what many architects have had to do before.
That's a good one. I mean, who's setting the agenda? Is it the client or is it the architect?
I think the world is setting the agenda, don't you? I mean,
I agree.
The planet is setting the agenda.
Nadja.
Yeah, so I think that it's important not to see architecture as, one thing alone. Architecture is like a collaboration and a partnership with the rest of the world.
Architecture is God.
You may think that. I don't know. I don't have an opinion on that. I think you should be. It's important to always be critical about yourself. So I hope that you bring that to the conference, and that you're not just having a conference where you're all nodding at each other, saying that we're amazing Supermans, like you're all doing here. Yeah. And I think that is so important that you have different perspectives, because when you have different perspectives, then you also get to be critical about what you're doing. When you started earlier talking about how it was only men who was, I don't even remember what it was, but when it's only men, or when it's only like white people, or when it's only people from from, one part of society.
Or maybe
We're
only
not
women too.
Yeah, but that is not good enough. It's like now we're also like not.
Just trying to balance things here.
Yeah, but diversity is not just about gender. It's also about bringing indigenous people in. It's also about bringing, people from other social backgrounds. And I think that is needed in every industry, not limited to architecture, but also in architecture. And that is something that I think should be the responsibility of every company to think about how do we create a diverse company where we are finding solutions to problems that works for everyone and not just some parts of the society.
And I agree, I absolutely agree. I'll applaud you there. And I think also that it would be disbeneficial for a conference of architects not to try and learn from other people and industries. So, I mean, the idea of coming together as a group is not to talk amongst ourselves about what we should be and do. That becomes a marketing campaign. But rather to interface with different types of perspectives, viewpoints, socio-economic politics, all of those sorts of things to try and grow as a profession. Mm-hmm. And I think that's essential. I agree with you, absolutely. We always have to be self-critical, but not just be self-critical, but be proactive about what we introduce to ourselves.
Mm. But has that been the UIA congresses in the past, that you've just been patting each other's backs?
Oh no, I don't think so. I think what we've with UNESCO, we've created something called the World Capital of Architecture. Copenhagen will be a World Capital of Architecture for 1 year. Rio de Janeiro was the first one, and that's a city that has something like 60% of its population living in squalor and in squatted property and buildings they make for themselves. Of 7.5 billion people on this planet, there's probably a billion, at least a billion, who build for themselves with whatever they can scavenge on whatever land they can find. It's usually insalubrious, it's usually overcrowded, it's not serviced in a proper way. And so part of the challenge for our planet is accommodating this enormous need, human need that's out there. And I think UIA, as I tried to say earlier, has always tried to focus on how can the skills of design be applied to these glaring problems that are facing us. There are architects who are doing this. Anna Heringer from Germany, Francis Quéré from also Germany, but Africa originally.
Burkina Faso.
Alejandro Aravena. They've done wonderful projects that use indigenous materials, that teach people how to build for themselves in a better way, and that make lives better than they would have been had a designer not intervened. And I think that's such an important area for us as a profession to focus our efforts.
That's right.
So it doesn't sound silly to you if I say that architects can save the planet?
But then you do it, but then you have to do it in collaboration with other, sectors. There's not going to be one sector doing it, on its own. And I think.
But it's a part of it.
Yeah, of course, but then you can say everyone is going to save the world, and that is what, is going to happen. And I think that is, really important to keep in mind, because if you are one person or one sector believing that you are going to do this on your own, then you're up for failure.
But I don't think the architectural sector has had that mindset that we can actually help saving the planet.
But I think then you need to think how can you go beyond where you are just now? An example that I saw in Denmark, as far as I recall, was that architects were using wind turbine blades for buildings, and I'm pointing at a beautiful wind turbine that I can see on a picture, and I think that is so interesting, because we're having an energy sector where they are not able to recycle in a proper way, or having a perfect cycle of their own blades. So how can architectures, how can they help the energy sector, make them more sustainable while not having to use other materials? I think that is so interesting, and I know that it's not an ideal example of circular economy, because then the energy companies would use the blades themselves, but I think that that is a good example of collaboration beyond and between sectors, and that is something that I hope that architects would keep in mind to see and look at the rest of the world and see how can we contribute to problems that they are facing. And I think that what you talked about earlier regarding, modeling the future, that is also a need that we do have in the world. And I think that a lot of energy companies, for example, and a lot of other companies in other sectors, they need someone to model how the future look like if the future was running entirely on green energy or something else.
But this sustainability focus, I know that you might not agree with me, but I get the impression that it is new to the business to have this strong a focus on sustainability. I mean, it might have been social sustainability back in Le Corbusier's day, but today, this green change, this green movement that one can see among architects.
Yeah, one response I would make is that I think we have always been attracted to what I would describe as vernacular buildings and simple buildings that make use of natural energy sources, that use natural materials, that are adapted to the climate in which they exist. We go around and take pictures of barns and we admire things that people have built with their own hands because they're simple and beautiful and they work and they're ordinary in a beautiful way. And so I think in that sense we've always been about resource conservation and paying attention to resources. I just want to say that I'm so hopeful after walking through this space because you have a water pavilion over there, you have South Africa across the way, here are the Nordic countries, you have Pakistan next door, they're all talking about what they're doing or want to do or are trying to do to make a difference and to improve things. I think that's enormously hopeful. The investment being made here is astounding, really, and I think that's wonderful and we should celebrate it. And I certainly thank the Nordic countries for organizing these talks. I think they've been great and very helpful.
What do you see as the greatest challenges facing architects when it comes to the climate issues? Enlai.
It's a good question. I mean, I think for a start we have to understand that architecture is not just about building buildings. The building is a node, it's a thing within the city fabric that consumes and produces things, it's a kind of energy organism, it's a water user or producer, it has a social function, and if you don't see architecture as a flow, within the network, within the ecology of the city or within the ecology of nature, then you are in a way blind and unable to operate according to the rules of nature, according to the rules of the city, and according to the rules of, let's say, circularity, which would allow you to produce buildings that are not just sustainable, which I actually hate the word sustainable, because the word sustainable means that you can do what you're doing for as long as you like.
Keep it at.
Whereas if you consider the idea that architecture could be regenerative, meaning that it would improve the situation in which it lands, then it must understand itself in the place of the systems that the object architecture plugs into within the city and within nature.
Is it possible to give a very simple example of that? If one has a villa and it is placed on a windy plain in Wyoming.
Yes.
What should it do? I mean, should it be it has to have a wind turbine kind of possibility there,
maybe, the whole point about this, and it's a really good question, like what substantiates what is regenerative, for example. And the first thing you have to understand is that all of your challenges could be advantages. The idea of working in any context is to see what is the potential of the context. If it's windy, then maybe use wind. Maybe shape the building for the wind. Maybe create value from the wind. Maybe grow things that protect you.
You could have the house inside a greenhouse.
Indeed, or you could use the wind profitably. Let's say, for example, you could make a scoop out of the house and have parasailing people there, and that's what the wind is for. But the whole point is to understand the value of your context and see the challenges as opportunities. I know it sounds prosaic, but that's the truth. And then, and if it is in Wyoming and you understand that there is no grid attached, you have to figure out how to live without the grid. You have to figure out how to use the nature around you as being the source of your energy and food.
Exactly, and you can recycle the water, the wastewater, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you can grow things inside that greenhouse. And
I just spoke to a guy from the European Space Agency whose analysis was how do you survive on Mars, and actually part of that is to be able to take all of your waste and drink it and eat it.
You're laughing.
Yeah.
Thomas, why?
They actually have a Mars project at the ESA.
Yeah.
I've been to it outside of Oxford, and it's very interesting. It's kind of an architecture. It's about being autonomous and surviving on what's around you. And I don't know about the part about eating your own waste or anything like that, but
it's about growing food from.
Yeah, that part of it for sure.
We've got 5 minutes to save the world now, guys.
Yeah.
So okay, what should we do? What should we bring with us from here? What is the first thing we should do when we get home?
Do you want to start with?
It seems as if Nadja wants to start.
No, I just have a comment to it because I'm already starting to think about that turbine. You know, I can't get my head, beyond like having a turbine next to a house, just a really practical thing. Like it would make a lot of noise, there would probably be like changing shadows all the time. And the reason why I've heard that is that has been a huge debate in Denmark, and there's so many local people who are so annoyed about that. So that is just, an interesting perspective, and you might want to have that turbine, another place than just next to a house.
It was just an idea.
Of course I like the idea of being
that's the main excuse among architects, right? It was just an idea.
Yeah,
sorry.
but I think what is really important is to see that even that house in Wyoming is still part of a bigger system, even though you're trying to make a system that can, be self-sufficient, you're still having an effect on the rest of the world. And I think that is just really important to keep in mind that, okay, well, sometimes the wind is not blowing, then where do you want to have your energy from? So no matter what, we're part of something bigger. And I think that especially at this COP, this is so important to keep in mind that to actually succeed and to actually, keep 1.5 being, within reach, then we need to collaborate and we need to find a meaningful way where we can contribute and help each other with going beyond and helping each other with the problems that others may have.
Great. Now, to the advice, what should the audience do when they get home? Enlai wants to start.
I think they should start, and this is maybe answering also your first question, your most recent question of what should architects do in the future? I think the idea is to try and imagine a future in which your actions don't lead to degradation or damage, but you can imagine all of the things that we love to do as human beings, right? We like to dance, we like to eat, we like to cook together, we like to fix things and make things and create objects and art and all of these things. Isn't there a way that we can do it that is a net positive to nature, actually? Isn't there a situation where, humans are interesting because we are 0.05% of the biomass on the planet, yet what we produce in terms of buildings, structures, designs, objects, has already outweighed all of nature. Every living thing on the planet, the technosphere outweighs the biosphere. And the question is, not to say go back to nature, but eat nuts and berries, but the question is, how do we imagine a future where the technosphere is good for the biosphere? And that is what I have to try and do, and I think that's what everybody has to try and do. Imagine a way in which a pleasurable future is profitable for nature.
Thomas Vernier.
I came here by train from Paris, and it took a little over 10 hours. It involved a very rushed trip between train stations in London. I read this guy, the man from Seat 61, who's done a series of estimates about the difference between flying and taking a train. And the Eurostar, he's analyzed everything, how the electricity is produced, how people get to the train, the whole chain, as much as any obsessed person could possibly analyze. And it is 1/10 of the imprint of taking an airplane. 1/10, 10%. So I guess what I'd say is, and I thought hard about whether I was even going to do that, because it's a privilege to come here. And I thought, well, you know, what am I going to do? And am I making a contribution, or I'm just using up that, whatever that carbon resource is that got me here? And I would say that we have, each of us in our daily lives, an opportunity to do things in a way that is mindful and conscious of what we are doing. And we should do that. I think that's the message I'd like to leave.
Nadja.
I would hope that everyone really try to be aware of their black spots, and be aware of where is the clouds on my sky. Like, what do I need to do? And even though you're an architect and you're feeling like God and feeling like you're Superman, like really try to be critical about yourself and ask people about where is my blind spots? Like, do you see anything that I'm not aware of? And I think that is both in regards to trying to ask a person who doesn't look like you, who's maybe an indigenous person, who's maybe having another gender, something like that, ask that person. And I think that is especially important to keep in mind that this COP, where we're collectively here in the blue zone, which is so exclusive, where there's really not that many people who have even had the access to this zone. So be aware who is not here, which voices are we not listening to, and try to find them. Not just go out in the green zone, but really try to find the people and see where your knowledge stops, and try to fill that in.
And that's actually something that we talked about in our very first talk today, this morning. And that is something that the UIA Congress could take with it, right?
I think so, Mark.
To introduce those people, to bring those people into the conference, the Congress, sorry.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say? Or should we wrap it up?
Does the audience want to
No. Thomas Vonier.
Thank you.
Nadja Godestrup Christensen. Thank you. And Enlai Hui. Correct?
You said it in the Russian way.
Thank you all. And thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you.